Good morning. It is March 5th, and we are still in chapter 6. Yes. Yay. Oh, here comes Joyce. And accident. And again, funny, but very poignant. And I have to tell you, there's a lot of Russians in Israel. And, you know, if you're English in Israel, you can listen to the news, you can do whatever, and watch TV, yada, get a newspaper. The same with the Russians. They have newspapers, TV stations, and, you know, they're just, it's very prevalent. So, and I thought this whole, and also the hospital that he had been at, Ichalov, I've also been there. It's a big hospital. And this also gives us a window into their life. She must have tried to have other kids and could not. And, you know, again, it's just poignant. And then the taxi driver talking incessantly. We have all been there. Other opening thoughts on the accident? Well, the cab, they get into a yelling match.
Oh, right.
And, you know, the cab driver is insulted, and finally, like, he has to say to him, right, that, but yeah, besides the crash, and, you know, he had to like top him with, you know, look, you know, my wife, you know, I have to get to the hospital. My wife had a miscarriage, and then finally that silences the driver. And I feel that sometimes when people complain to you and you have to, I don't want to say one up them. And this is when I had cancer, and my girlfriend was complaining. I'm like, I have cancer. Can't complain. Stop it. And she did for a hot minute. So anyway, I think that's I think sometimes we don't realize how we sound. Although in his case, I thought he was absolutely he was justified in getting so mad at that. 30 years, I'm a cabbie, he tosses back to me as he gets out of the taxi. 30 years and not one accident. Alone in the cab, I can feel the tears rising. And remember, we just read the paragraph about how he's never cried, and this says you don't cry. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. I want to be positive like my dad. My wife is fine now, and we already have a wonderful son. My dad survived the Holocaust and has reached the age of 83. That's not just glass. That's a half full glass. It's an overflowing one. I don't want to cry, not in this taxi. The tears are welling up and will soon begin to flow. Suddenly I hear a crashing boom and the sound of windows breaking. The world around me shatters. A silver car veers across the next lane, completely smashed. The taxi moves too, but not on the ground. It floats above it toward the concrete wall on the other side of the road. After it hits, there's another bang. Another car must have hit the taxi. I mean, really, you know, this is a very, you know, viscerally, we can hear and feel what happened there. And then he has to get in the ambulance. It's really a sad story. I was like, the paramedic tells him, you know, you're lucky, blah, blah, blah. The minute you're discharged from the hospital, he says, you should run to the nearest synagogue and give thanks for still being alive. And that prayer is Gomel, to bench Gomel. And After my doctor said I had no evidence of disease, I did it on a Friday night here because I think showing people, how to bench Gomel can be very powerful. But I think having, an Orthodox guy tell you that in the taxi cab instead of coming to it on your own is a little bit different. Other thoughts about what he's going through?
I thought the end was really interesting.
I
The
did too.
denial. The fact is that you put on your best face at all times. You don't cry. You don't want to cry in the taxi, but you don't want to tell your father you're in the hospital.
Right.
Or when I just think that that's really so human to protect those around you. And it's about protection to
Yes.
protect those around you from the reality of lying with a broken back
Yes.
in the hospital,
Right.
whatever happened to him.
The last paragraph on page 139. Why are you crying? My dad asked now from the other end of the line. It's nothing, I say, as the ambulance stops next to the emergency ward and the paramedic slams the ambulance doors open. Really, it's nothing. And I think Mary is absolutely right. Judy.
I like the whole dialogue that precedes it as well, because his father's lying to him too, for the same reason.
Yes.
Yes.
It's in the store.
Yeah. It's in the story.
Some woman lost her purse.
And I wrote in my notes, we all play this game.
Yes.
We just do. It's the game you play.
How many times does someone say, "How are you?" and you're really not good?
Yeah.
You say, "Oh, I'm
You
fine."
always- yeah.
And you smile
You
and move
always
on.
say, "I'm
And I
fine."
think sometimes it's good to say, "You know what?"
Yeah.
Someone did this at the rec center yesterday that I'm friends with. They walk in, they go, "I've had a shitty day." And then they proceed to tell me about all the things that went wrong. And they were all little things. And he has a really good sense of humor. But yeah, it was a bad day.
Bad
in
day.
the household,
Bad
no
day.
question.
Right.
But we all have that. But usually we cover it up.
Yes. People have been asking me all this week, and I was spending half my time in the hospital in Hoffman Estates. That's a different story. That's where his doctor is. Anyway, I wanted to say to him, did you pick the hospital that was the farthest away? And that's the one you took. And part of you wants to be private, and he's an adult now. When we went, it's the peds ward. When we went up to the ward, she goes, "You have to sign in." I know he's an adult. He's 28. He's going to be 29, but you have to sign in. Anyway, I just, we protect those around us, and sometimes it's a privacy thing. Anyone else? Comments? We'll go to a mustache for my son.
Oh, I love this one.
This is hilarious. And, my son-in-law has been wearing a mustache. And I don't think my daughter likes it. I don't like it. And Arthur has a beard, which is gray, but his mustache is black or auburn or whatever. And it looks like all you can see is the mustache. He wanted, I like decorating the house, baking cake. And Love stared at me intently for a few seconds and said, "I want you to do something special with your face." So I thought that, but see, the associations aroused by a mustache are more along the lines of Shaft, Burt Reynolds, German porn stars, and Omar Sharif. and Bashar al-Assad, who is gone now. Okay, Alice and then Sue. Wait, let me unmute you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, no, unmute. There we go. There.
Okay. Look, just two things. I just have to repeat. I think these stories are so brilliant because I have now read some of them 2 or 3 times. And each time I think I get something new out of them. And okay, yes, of course, this was about the mustache, but I think this story is summed up in the last paragraph. The story of a kid with a scribble that looks like a mustache who almost killed a man with an umbrella that looked like a rifle on a covert operation that looked like a war. A day after Lev's birthday, I'll shave this mustache off. After all, reality here is confusing enough as it is. I
Here,
mean,
here.
it sums up that, his personal life is reflecting what's happening in Israel. And I
Yes.
think he just does such a good job of bringing his personal life to light. And then in the same way, bringing what's happening in Israel to light to all of us. So I think
Yeah.
it's brilliant. This story I thought was one of the more
I agree.
enlightening. Yeah.
Right. And again, you can visualize it, Sue.
Yeah, I love this story. And the reason I probably loved it is that my father had a mustache.
Mm.
My mother had never seen him without it. When she met him, he had a mustache. And I guess it was about 3 months before my wedding, my father came out of the bathroom one night without his mustache. And it was like, who is this man? I don't know him. And I started to cry. How could you do this before my wedding? He never grew it back.
He didn't?
No, never had it again.
Huh.
And actually, he was better looking without it.
All right.
And my husband grew a mustache once with a beard, and I hated it. I have one picture of him with it.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, my kids called him the Frito Bandito.
Okay, that needs some grooming.
Yeah.
Lynn and then Alice. Oh, wait, let me unmute you, Lynn, and go. And then Beverly.
Is my picture all fuzzy?
Yeah.
Yes.
So is my, I don't know.
This is what I want you to do.
Yeah.
There's a little green light on, or, you need to polish your camera. It's like somebody fingerprinted it or.
I don't even know where, this is my iPad, so I don't know.
Well, you gotta find.
Anyway,
Yeah.
just a brief comment. You can tell Gary, maybe Gary, do you know, they say I have to polish my camera.
I don't know.
He doesn't know either.
Okay.
I just have a note here that I wrote that assumptions. I think the story is about assumptions too, and what the assumptions we make about people based on their appearance, and
Yes.
they could cause real harm. I think we make assumptions about people all the time, and it's gotten me into some disastrous situations. So I always think in his stories, underlying the outward humor, underneath lies a more serious message that's coming across here. That's all I have to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Then we're going to get to Alice and Beverly. But I told my husband early on, never, ever ask a woman if she's pregnant.
Oh,
I said, don't do that. So many men are like, and I've heard women say to me, because after the baby, whatever, they asked me if I was still pregnant. I said to Arthur, a penalty,
Never.
you can never do that. And he said to me once, do you think? And I'm like, yes. Do you think? No, you should just have the baby.
I think one of the assumptions in this is we just expect Arabs to have mustaches.
Yes.
Yes.
That too.
And that is,
Yes.
it's imitation.
Yes, you're right. And listen, Mizrahi Jews. Alice and then Beverly. Alice.
Yeah, this goes along with what Susan was saying. Okay, my husband has a beard and a mustache, and he has gone, I've known him for like 50 years, almost 50 years, and he's gone through all different stages, beard, no mustache, mustache, no beard, nothing. But I have to say, he had a mustache and a beard when our daughter was born, and he had it. She was a little girl, and he shaved everything off. She was terrified. She didn't recognize her dad. I mean, she was used to him with a beard and a mustache. She did not like it at all. And he grew it back, and he's had it for many, 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 many years. But it's funny. one more thing about it's not just men, Vanessa, who make mistakes about women being pregnant.
Yes.
Years and years and years ago, I made that mistake, and I will never, ever, ever ask somebody if they're pregnant or not. I can't even remember what situation it was, but I didn't know the woman, obviously. I just, oh my God, I wanted to crawl into a hole. It was the worst thing I've ever said.
And I'm sure that person doesn't remember, Alice, but it's something you can't remember. Beverly and then Mary. Beverly.
I just wanted to say that in this particular story, I never really thought about the connotations of beards being, religious, all the things that he said a beard could mean. And this gave me new insight. And I also wanted to say that a lot of, for especially young men, it's a question of, can I grow facial hair?
Yes, it is.
That am I old enough? Am I virile enough? I think that is sometimes why young men especially do try to grow facial
Yes.
hair. Sometimes they
Yes.
can.
If you read our last book, the book at the nighttime, Leaving Eastern Parkway, these really orthodox, kids, they can't shave and they have patchy beards and they look, they look ridiculous. I think they look awful. Let's
I'm
see.
in the middle of that book, by the way.
Oh, do you like it?
I love it.
I know. So when Zeb is trying to grow that beard, it's just Mary.
Pregnancy thing. I'm the only one sharing this, but many of you know my husband. He goes to a business association meeting. I was there too. It's cocktail hour. There's a woman there he hasn't seen probably in about a year. And he walks up to her, goes, "Oh, are you pregnant?" And she goes, "No, I've just gained a lot of weight." He has never, and he's the diplomat. This is Rick. This is my husband who doesn't do these kinds of things. I don't know. And he has never forgotten it, ever. Sue knows him well enough to know it's almost, would Rick do that? No.
Right.
It's shocking. But it just popped out of his mouth. "Oh, are you, congratulations on your pregnancy."
Yeah.
And she goes,
Yeah.
"I'm pregnant. I'm just fat."
That's really, it's just, if anyone's ever done it, you just want to crawl into yourself. So this is, I also think, what we read at the end, reality here is confusing enough as is. And I think we can apply that to the United States of America as well. What's true and what's not true.
Without exception.
Without exception.
Let's not go there.
We're not, but Love at First Whiskey. 5 years. So this talks about their where they met. And I thought it was hilarious because, he thought she said, "Give me a kiss." And she thought,
Taxi.
right, yes, how about a taxi? That's just classic. Merle. There you go.
Okay. I just thought this story was so funny, and everybody can relate to this story because we all have a story about how we met our spouse.
Yes.
And the part that really hit me was when his wife listens to him tell the story, she says something about, "We're also like the way we met. Our life is one thing and you always reinvent it to be something else more interesting." But I thought, more importantly, we're like the way we met. And I was thinking, I met my husband in the high school library, and we were both volunteering in the high school library. And it just sort of reflected our whole life that I continued to be all crazy about books. And he was always interested in supporting people who were interested in books. And so I thought the way they met was so funny.
Yeah.
And that they both met under such weird circumstances,
Yeah.
that his father had the confrontation with the
Mhm.
police, and that he was drunk. So it was a great story, though. Everyone can relate to it. And I think you don't really completely know a person until you ask them, "How did you meet your spouse?" And then you really get to know more.
Yeah. Arthur put I don't know. It's some type of bottle away for when my youngest son, who has been dating a woman for over 5 years, is going to get engaged. And once they came over and her sister and brother and mother were there, and Arthur says to me, this is before COVID. He goes, I think this is it. And then I said, yeah, no, I don't think this is it, honey. And we had to put whatever the drink was, the champagne, we put it back. We put it back. So, and they're bringing out the whiskey. And again, if you go to a traditional synagogue on Saturday morning after Kiddush, they have a whole thing, slivovitz, where usually the men take a l'chaim, and that's very normal. I think in 2025, as we look at it being a caring synagogue and not having liquor around all the time, in our Kiddush cup on Friday night, it's grape juice. Those things are changing a little bit, but in some places they are not. They are not changing. Let's see. So I thought it was very, very sweet. I thought it was very, very sweet. And then she said, what about us? I asked. I fell in love with my wife in a nightclub. Oh, right. So that was the whole thing with that. I got to get up early. Kiss me. And I think I shrugged, feeling, this is the last paragraph on 148. I shrugged, feeling slightly rebuked. Not that I'm complaining, my wife said, kissing me. Compared to your family tradition of drunken peeing on embassy walls, you could say I got off easy. I very, very, very funny. Yeah. And yeah. So Merle.
I just wondered if anybody knows what the Hebrew is, so we could hear the confusion of what he heard. Where she said, "You're going to have trouble getting."
Well, I do. Give me a kiss is Tainli Nishika, what did he say? I said I needed to.
You'd never find a taxi.
Taxi. Lo hechapes taxi. Because taxi is a taxi, but taxi and Nishika, maybe it got mixed up.
Perception. That's
Right.
I really think it's what you hear what you want to hear.
You hear what you want to hear. Absolutely, you hear what you want to hear. Occasionally you. Sometimes Arthur says something. I said, "Did you say blah blah blah?" He goes, "I didn't say that, but I heard what I wanted to hear." So, yeah. Okay. Right. So here we are at Shiva. So just to refresh everybody's memory, we have Etgar, who's kind of a secular Israeli, but probably goes to synagogue, the super, super Orthodox sister, and the brother in Thailand. I mean, it's like they're from 3 different families. Again, when you sit Shiva in a traditional space in Israel or here, you sit in a low chair or you take the cushions off a chair. And frankly, any Jewish funeral home, Chicago Jewish Funerals is here today, they have Shiva chairs that are low to the ground and uncomfortable. So, that was, very true to form. So they're talking about stories that they hear. It wasn't clear at the time if that was a blessing or a threat, that the story that until you come to Torah, that's really, you're not going to die. Judy.
This story reminds me of, you talk about embarrassing moments when you tell a woman that you think she's pregnant. I went to an Orthodox funeral, and it was the first time I had ever gone to one in someone's home. And the women were in the kitchen,
Mhm.
the men were in the living room. Cushions were off the couches, mirrors were covered. And I walked up to my dear friend and his suit was torn. Now, I had only seen the little black grosgrain thing that they ripped.
Korea,
I had
yeah.
never seen someone's actual suit being torn.
Mhm.
I went to him and I said, you might want to change your jacket. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was so embarrassing. I don't know how to explain it, but he didn't have to change his jacket.
No, and he kept it on the whole week.
He kept, yeah, absolutely. But it's the rituals that are involved in how we celebrate death
Yeah.
that have different meanings for different people.
Mhm.
And the depth of those feelings are reflected in how we celebrate death.
Mhm. Mhm. Alice.
Yeah, so I was just at a funeral in Shiva. Okay, it's my my Makhotanam. His mother died. You know, my son-in-law's grandmother. Anyways, my Makhotanam, he is one of 3 children. And I've never asked exactly how they were raised. I mean, he's Jewish, but I think it was pretty unobservant. I don't think, I'm not sure if he was bar mitzvahed or not. I don't know. Anyways, the story I'm going to tell is that he is not very religious and he married, his wife is Catholic, and they raised their kids kind of like, you know, going for Easter dinner, going for a Seder, but, you know, nothing really religious on either side. But anyways, his mother died. His brother and sister are very, very religious. I would say the brother is maybe modern Orthodox. The sister lives in one of these communities in New York where it's, you know, all Orthodox. Anyways, so, you know, it was interesting. We were wondering what the Shiva was going to be like. And I said, well, it's going to be for a whole week. It's going to be a traditional Shiva because we were talking to our daughter about, I think, when she was going to go, blah, 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 blah. And sure enough, it was. And the same thing, what you're saying, Judy, walked in, the brother, he didn't have a suit jacket on at the house. It was his house. But the brother had a dress shirt on that was like all like stained and torn. And, you know, it was the same thing. And I said, oh, yeah, you know, he's Orthodox. So this is, and the other thing is, when you said the women were in the kitchen, I really never saw some of the people, I think, because I never went in the kitchen. I think they must have been in the kitchen sitting on the low chairs because I didn't see them. I was just, you know, sitting next to my family in their living room. But, you know, it was so interesting to see. I knew that the more religious part of the family would, you know, they would kind of control what the Shiva was going to be like. And then,
Right.
like
So
my daughter said,
the more Alice, the more observant,
that, exactly,
not
the more
religious,
observant.
not
Yeah,
religious.
thank you. You're right. The more observant. And,
I have a thing
you know,
about
and
that.
it was like that. And my daughter said that her father-in-law wasn't even going to go to the Shiva every day because it didn't mean, you know, that wasn't meaningful to him. So it was interesting to see it all play out.
All right. Sue, and then Lynn.
One of the things I found really interesting about this story is how it managed to bring 3 siblings who had been so apart, and the death of a parent brought them together
Yeah.
in a way that they had not been before.
Yeah.
Even though they came from different, within themselves, they had different belief systems.
Right.
But at the end, I mean, I love the last sentence. Well, I don't know, that's a long sentence. It's okay. But it ends about being proud of their dad without apology or criticism, just like children should.
Mhm.
And I just love that part of
Yeah.
the end of this story.
Yeah, it is absolutely beautiful. Lynn,
I don't even know where to begin because there's so many issues in this story that aroused in me, and this idea of when Alice kept saying religious, religious, and I kept saying observant, observant. And I'm so mixed up on all the different terminologies and the assumptions we make about the different people who are practicing different ideas of what they feel is important to them. To me, the Shiva, I think this, Vanessa, you're not going to like this. I don't know. I think Judaism is a potpourri of lots of different rituals and customs and cultures, and you get to choose what is meaningful for you. And to me, I was raised in a very reform home. Were we observant? No, but culture, we did some cultural things. But the Shiva was always the Shiva for all that. And it was a time for healing. And I remember at many of our Shivas, people would be cracking jokes and laughing and telling stories. And it was a healing moment for us. So I felt that here, what is the true purpose of it? And I kept writing in my book, outer and inner in terms of outer observance versus inner feelings. And we, do we, in terms of our religion, people in our religion condemn other forms of our religion because people aren't as observant as they should be.
they're here.
There's something about that. So I love the story because it showed the inner and the outer. And that's what happens in Judaism. There are people who are quite observant, and there are people who are just compassion. They take the elements of the religion,
Right.
and they make that
Right.
part of their life.
Right. Judy.
My son-in-law died during COVID from cancer.
Boy.
There was no Shiva. I want you to know, Shiva is very important, no matter how you celebrate it. Not having Shiva leaves a hole in your heart
Mhm.
forever.
Absolutely.
Not only for me, my grandchildren, my daughter,
Yeah.
my husband.
That
It's
happened.
Shiva, no matter how you do it, if you don't have it,
Yeah.
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Sue.
That happened to me also. My husband died right in the heart of
Yeah.
COVID. Not only could we not have a Shiva, we couldn't even have a real funeral.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
I
a
remember
roadside
that.
service, and we were allowed 10 people.
Right.
Right,
And
right.
I mean, it was,
Yeah.
to this day, I still feel
Yeah.
dissatisfied.
Yeah.
Because there really was, they tried a Shiva on Zoom. Oh, that was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
We had 3 of them.
And
It's horrible.
yeah, it was just,
Yeah.
it was terrible.
I agree with Lynn. There's different levels of observance, but I do say for the most part, and I don't say this often, the Orthodox community, when there is Shiva, they turn out in droves.
Yes.
And I remember it was somebody I worked with at the Board of Jewish Education. Her husband was shot. He had a business on the South Side, and I went to the Shiva, and you could barely move an inch. And then, later, there was another Shiva of somebody, from the congregation I was at, a Reformed congregation, and there was, barely a minion. So, somewhere in between, and now we don't have the prohibitions of COVID, and that was so hard for everybody. The first Zoom funeral I saw was of a woman my age who had died of cancer, and the funeral homes, they do a fine job, but they were just getting used to Zooming. And it was January, it was snowing, and it looked like a black and white movie. And it was and we couldn't hear. It was the saddest thing I've ever, and you know, you don't always remember every funeral, but you know, and I remember Richard's funeral because it was the same thing. It was bad weather, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's November.
Yeah.
Bad weather,
Just terrible.
December.
freezing cold.
Terrible, terrible, terrible. Merle, then Alice.
I think for most Shivas, you don't really know who's coming. You put out the information and people come. But I was actually at a Shiva. There was a Shiva by invitation only for a lady who died at the age of 89, and her family was Jewish. And they only allowed about 22 people to come to the Shiva. And they had photos of her from her childhood and all the way up through 89, and how she was a beautiful, beautiful person and she loved languages. And I met her studying French. We took semi-private French lessons together for 38 years. I met her when she was 51 and she died at 89. So I'd seen this woman every week for 38 years to study French. And I felt so honored to be invited to this Shiva by invitation. And I thought, was it wrong to do Shiva by invitation?
Never heard of that.
Yeah, I say yes. And you know, they say that you announce Shiva and you announce a bris, and you know, and you go. But that's in traditional Judaism. Alice, then Lynn.
Yeah, I
Else.
was just gonna give a shout out to, well, this was so well before we merged, but my mom passed away. I think we had been members, but I didn't know very many people. We'd been members, I think, maybe for a couple of years when my mom passed away, but I didn't really know very many people. And we had Shiva at my house, and I remember two people walked in. It might have been Wendy Rhodes, and it was somebody else. I can't remember, from Solel. And it makes me cry now. It made me feel so good
Yep.
and so much a part of a community.
Yeah.
Do we still do that? Does Macomb still do that? Do we send
Do
people
what?
to?
I mean,
Well,
I think it's up to the person. I know that I go to Shiva, and there's a lot of things I try to drag my husband to, and he's like, no.
This
But
was
when
different.
but when I say it's Shiva, he goes. And we say afterwards, you know, you always feel good after a Shiva. You always know you made
But
the right
Vanessa,
decision.
this was
Yeah.
different. This was different. These were two people that it wasn't like that I was really friendly with them. They came, I think it was a committee or something, that they always sent one or two people to every funeral. And I can't tell you.
Yeah.
How-
I don't know. I mean,
I
the thing
still
is
remember
that
Well, used to do that. Yes.
because so many people go, like when Alex Cooperman, when his mom died, you know, there's a lot of people here, and you know, some people know him, some people don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Lynn, Beverly, Joyce.
You know
Lynn.
what? Beverly has had her hand up, so.
Oh, Beverly.
Oh,
Then
well,
Lynn and Joy.
okay. I just, I see it. I don't know if it's a trend, but I see it a lot of cremation. And then one day at the country club with an enormous spread, done. And I,
Sign up.
what?
I'm sorry, I was making a joke and I was unkind and I apologize.
I don't know, you know, I'm not the most observant person. I have an Orthodox daughter, so I know the culture and I know the in-between. But I have to say, without being judgmental, there's something about it that really bothers me.
Yeah, I don't say much about it.
Well, yeah, it's you know, I listen. I've been to a country club, Shiva, and they're delicious.
Well said.
And actually, I went to one, Mary. I went to one, and Rick didn't go, and I'm like, oh, you missed it. Rick should have been there. You know,
Best food ever.
I mean, it was at Lake Shore.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fancy. Okay, Lynn and then Joyce.
Well, I'm gonna come back to what I said. Judaism opens up options, good or bad. I mean, my I've heard it said by Orthodox or more conservative people that, that it's Reform Judaism is just too liberal. You are given too many choices. Look, this is a very personal part of our lives. If somebody wants to invite people to their Shiva, why not? I mean, it's their grief that they're dealing with. And if they don't want a lot of people that they don't know coming, they don't find that comforting. Okay, so it's my feeling that the Shiva really is, and this is interesting. Gary and I went to wasn't a Shiva because she wasn't Jewish, but it was the visitation.
Awake. If they're Catholic, it's awake.
It's awake, yeah.
And I said to her husband, all these wonderful things. He said, "Don't tell me, tell her mother." So I think it is.
Can you disinvite people from coming to a Shiva? I don't want you to come.
Joyce Schrager just lost her husband this year. And she sent me a text that he had died. It was not in the paper or anything. And she told me when the funeral was going to be. It was and he was a very well known.
Wasn't in the paper
very
either.
well. It was in the paper eventually. It wasn't packed. This is how she chose to do this. And so I think we need to be, the country club thing is, it's not my flavor, but it's somebody else's flavor.
We're gonna do Joyce and then Merle. I can tell you this, there's many, many, many more Shivas here at Macomb.
I know that.
And it's a way for them to, makes it easier. Joyce.
The whole community.
I was going to say something else, and I still will, but I just heard of a Shiva being held at the funeral home.
Yes. I went to one.
I had never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Chicago Jewish Funerals specifically built a room where you can have a big Shiva.
Okay, but what I was going to say is I vividly remember when my father-in-law died 37 years ago, and we went back to my mother-in-law's small little apartment, and it was basically just the family, and we were sitting around and we were telling stories about him. And my father-in-law was a fabulous storyteller himself and a joke teller. And we were laughing and retelling some of his stories. And I remember feeling, are we doing something sacrilegious? And then we had a discussion about it. And my husband, God bless him, said, no, because we are remembering him with love. And this is what you do at a Shiva.
Absolutely.
You recall and you retell, and as long there's a prayer or a poem, I can't remember the exact words, but it's basically as long as you talk about the person, they too will be remembered. And I it just sticks in my head. And to this day, every time we talk about my father-in-law, it's always with the stories and the jokes and the wonderful, wonderful memories of him.
Merle.
No, I just wanted to get back to the Shiva by invitation.
Yes.
When my friend died at the age of 89, she had been a widow for a few years. And she said to me that her sister had been so supportive at the time that her husband died. And I had never met her sister. So at this small gathering, I was able to meet her sister. And her sister was maybe 85. And I said to her sister, your sister was so grateful that you helped her at the time that her husband died. And she said, oh, thank you for telling me that. I
Right.
did. She felt that way
Yeah.
because this 89-year-old lady was not the kind of effusive person. So I thought this Shiva by invitation really wasn't such a bad idea in some
Yeah.
ways, because you could actually talk to the people when most
Right.
of it was so crowded. It's just, you know,
Listen, I agree with Lynn that we have a lot of choices, and that is what Reform Judaism was about. But I would say to the Shiva by invitation, what if you forgot someone? What if they had left you off the list? Or what if they had left, and yes, she was old, and yes, they probably knew, or a lot of people before they die, this is my obituary, this is the list for, maybe she had done the list. I don't know, but I would, what if somebody was left off? That would be my thing. Mary.
You don't know everybody that person, even if it's your sister or your brother or your aunt, I mean, whoever it is, whoever you're planning, whatever. You don't know everybody in their lives. And I know that Elaine Greenberg said there are people that showed up for David that were business people that loved him and were involved in his life, not her life. And that she was so moved by some of the people who came that she didn't even know about. And I think that's part of it, is you don't know everything about your spouse's life. You know your life with him.
Yeah, right. We had a funeral here, and they wanted to use the chapel. And people were coming in droves. And I don't know, I know you'll find it hard to believe, but I was like kind of micromanaging. I go, we have to go to the sanctuary. And they're like, no, they want it in the chapel. I said, we have to go to the sanctuary. We had to put chairs out. We had to, push the walls back and put chairs out. Said, we have to. Our chapel holds 130. We have 400. And so there was a lot of people at this funeral. So, and sometimes people will say to us, oh, it's going to be really big, super big. And Rabbi Serrata will always say to me, it's in the middle of the day. They were older. I don't know. So it's always interesting to see what happens. Judy.
My son, when we had all these Zoom things for the
Yeah.
funeral, there were all of his business people, and they're a lot from Europe.
Yeah.
So she would have never known all the people that had to. There were literally, dozens and dozens of people, both in here and in Europe, that were business people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Lynn.
I want to go back to the story for a minute.
Yes. Good idea.
The first line, one morning, my grandmother's brother decided to stop being religious. And that's when that's the heart of the story, what that means. What does that mean, being religious? And I think the story that they tell, which is part of Shiva, is storytelling, shows, and it says in the last page, but for a secular man, your father, to do it, he really had to be you pronounce it, Tzaddik. Okay. So I looked that up. And it's a righteous person versus a rabbi who is a religious teacher, a law expert. So we're talking here about how do we show that a person has lived a, quote, religious life? What does that really mean? And, I think that makes us think about religion in our life, or spirituality, or observance, or what we want to do with our lives. And I think a lot of this has disappeared from our society. And the point made, Beverly, who made the point about the country club?
Me.
Okay. They've taken the Shiva out of the home, and the home is where it's an intimate gathering and a chance to tell stories. And I think our society, it reflects what's going on in our society, really, in terms of what kind of people do we want to be? And what in our religion guides us to be the kind of people we want to be. And if you stop being religious, if that means I'm stop being compassionate, or I'm going to stop being kindly, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So I think that's what he's probably saying about this whole
Right.
Shiva. It stands for
right.
something else.
We have Merle and then Judy, but one quick, this is translated. So, you know, I don't know if he said dati, which they say, and dati means observant. And so I'm parsing those words
Okay.
because, you know, so many people say Reformed Jews are not religious, and they can be very religious. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see that in the original Hebrew. Meryl and then Judy.
Well, I really had to look up the difference between religious and observant in a dictionary. I mean, religious, they say, is having a strong belief in a God. Now,
Right.
you could not believe in God at all and still be very observant. I know people who
Yeah.
are so observant and Shabbat and go to the synagogue every holiday.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily believe in God. So when he wasn't religious, he also stopped, cut off his payas. He stopped being observant in certain ways.
Yes.
But I thought the part about being religious, he said, I still don't believe in you at some point in the story.
Right.
Still
Yeah.
don't believe in God. So I think really those two words mean very different things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Judy.
I found it interesting to think in terms of not just Jewish, but Christian or Catholic or no, they too are having the same kind of problem right now. And those who follow the Bible, obviously, if you really believe in the Bible, you wouldn't be able to follow Republican politics. But
But we're not talking about that.
But the point
Where's Alice?
I think religion overall, not just Judaism, is going through an upheaval. And we could read this story with that in mind too.
Yeah. I think on page 153, Abraham raised a large, thriving family, yada, yada. It's just at the bottom of the page. At one point, after he had lost consciousness, the doctors told his family that he would not last more than a day. But that day went on. And a few weeks later, when my dad visited Abraham's family and heard how much he was suffering, he asked them for a prayer book and a yarmulke and went straight to the hospital, entered Abraham's room and prayed all night beside his bed. At dawn, he died. I mean, that, I don't know if if that happened or it's a really good part of storytelling, but I think, when he said, until you have God in your life, and that's how they put God in his life. So, Alice.
Yeah, I think it was just such a beautiful example of what a good person their father was.
Yes.
He was secular, but he kind of did a mitzvah, I guess, for the family.
Yeah.
I mean, Abraham was never going to be conscious again, probably, and he was just and so he was such a good man.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought that was a beautiful way of showing what a beautiful person he was.
Right.
Yes.
Me too.
We have 3 more stories in this book, which will be on March 19th. Our next book, I'll put it up on the screen. Spilt Milk. People like Displaced Persons, but it wasn't on Kindle. And so I know a lot of people read on Kindle, and so here we go. This had the second most votes, and now I don't have to look again when we finish this, because I think again this will be by Courtney Zoffness, and I think it's another. I've started reading it. There's some really light spots, which I know have been a comfort for me in some time in these troubled times. Beverly.
Yeah, I want to say that I have been reading on Kindle. And I think it really inhibits my understanding of the book, my rereading of the book. This time
Why?
I just ordered the Spilt Milk in paperback.
Okay.
And I just throwing that out, I think it really
Okay.
hinders my
Yeah.
participation.
I know that some people needed to make the print bigger and,
So.
but listen, however you want to read it, however you want to read it. And so that means April. Oh, and I gotta go look. And there's one, I think there's, I can't talk about it now. In April, we'll meet the 2nd and not the 16th. We'll only meet once in April because I will be out of town on that day and I'll be in Korea
Ooh.
at a family wedding. So you'll hear all the stories.
Good.
That's fun.
That's
Yeah.
fun. That's really fun.
Yay! So we're gonna go now and support Barb and her family, and it's good to see everyone. If you have any questions, oh wait, Lynn, yes, has a
So when
question.
are we starting Spilt Milk? Because I'm away, so do I need to order this now?
April 2nd.
All right, I return April 1st. So-
You can do it,
You'll read it on
Lynn.
the
You
plane.
can do
Read
it.
it on the plane.
We didn't finish this book. Are we gonna?
No, we're gonna do this book March 19th.
Oh, March 19th. Okay,
All right.
got it.
All right. Find someone who knows what an iPad is, and you gotta clean up that
I have
camera.
a tiny green light up
Yes,
there.
that's it.
Yes,
Now,
and then
what do I do with that?
you take your sweater and clean it.
Oh, you use a glass cleaner.
Or use a glass cleaner, yeah, because you obviously have something on there.
All right.
Yeah.
Although, let me just say, we don't see any wrinkles, Lynn. It's like you have, what the actresses have.
I'm not gonna
Keep
do
it.
anything. I'm not gonna do anything.
Yeah, do not do a thing.
Keep it the way it is. All right,
You look 40 years younger.
exactly. Be well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.